The progression and order that you find these Pikmin though are almost more important to me than their exact functions, and that might sound confusing, so let me explain myself.
Have I ever not?
So at this point in our playthrough, when finding the blue Pikmin, you're more or less given 3 options for how you want to continue your journey. Option A is returning to the impact site, where having all 3 types not only helps us find one more ship part, but is a great place to grind all Pikmin. This is usually where I immediately head after discovering the blue Pikmin, and it sets me with numbers that usually last the entire playthrough. Option B is returning to the Forest of Hope, where blue Pikmin are crucial to getting the remaining ship parts and fighting a few bosses you may have missed before. And option C is just continuing to explore the Forest Navel, which has a lot to do still. I think having these options is excellent game design. Pikmin, which released in 2000 and gosh darn 1, was well before the prominence of open world games. Now back then, there was the occasional open world game you wouldn't dare let sit near your lunch table, such as GTA 3.
Don't worry, GTA 3, the jocks peak in high school.
Point being, open world games existed back then. It was an interesting idea to give the player freedom and options. Gross. I'm sure if technology wasn't so restrictive, we'd have seen open world games from day one. Now, how does this relate to Pikmin, you may ask? And to that, I'd say stop interrupting me. Pikmin took full advantage of the GameCube's hardware, with up to 100 Pikmin being able to be present on the field at a single time, plus Olimar, plus Sheer Grubs. Not to mention, Nintendo didn't get around to open world games until, 16 years later. Very classic Nintendo. However, Pikmin, despite just being open area, almost resembles an open world game in structure because of these choices. Having the option to switch between open areas here is genius, as it gives the player a feeling of freedom without actually having to put the elbow grease in to do it from Nintendo's perspective. In a sense, this day system, and never needing to stay in one place, is the biggest favor Nintendo gave to the Pikmin franchise. You're quite literally on an adventure, and there's more than enough reason to check out each and every area. I already talked about the impact site and the Forest of Hope, so let's circle back to the Forest Navel. This level's incredibly dark, to the point where seeing a little bread bug walking around can give you a heart attack. The game seriously ramps up the difficulty here as well. No more Bulborbs, sure, but every enemy here is just as, if not more, threatening. This is the area that introduces the infamous Wollywogs, who someone out there has definitely fainted over seeing before. They take forever to defeat by throwing, so really, the only effective method of attack is to swarm them with a really large group of Pikmin. The Forest Navel also introduces fiery blowhogs. I actually think these enemies are really clever and present a fascinating risk-reward. I mean, you could try to carry back treasures among these guys as they spray fire to your blue and yellow Pikmin, taking a pretty big risk at the trade-off of time. Or you could be safe, go get red Pikmin if you don't have them, and that's how you can bring back the treasure safely. These are scattered throughout the base floor, and even then, there are risks with leaving red Pikmin to attack them, as some of them face water if you're not careful. The Forest Navel also presents 2 bosses, one of which is the Puffstool, who can turn Pikmin against you with poison. But the one I always think about when I revisit this game is Beady Longlegs, a really unique spider boss. And hey, an actual reason to use yellow Pikmin. I love how each of these bosses has their own giant arena. Like, 80% of this won't be explored or needed, but it helps with the atmosphere quite a bit, especially with the Puffstool. In general, Forest Navel is, I think, the most balanced out of the levels in terms of using all 3 Pikmin. There's the fire conundrum quite literally everywhere. There's the high up places for yellow Pikmin, and there's water, but not too much water. Speaking of too much water, meet the distant spring. The distant spring is giant, but feels a lot more empty, with endless amounts of water and not much going on. Look, I love this game, so I'm not gonna just say I dislike one of the 3 big areas, but I do think that this was fairly rushed and not that thought out.
Hey, we need one more area. Can you guys get it done? The game ships tomorrow.
I mean, adding to that feeling, there's even a recycled boss fight here in the form of the Armored Cannon Beetle, which is first fought in the Forest of Hope, accessible once you get the blue Pikmin. Granted, there are a decent number of unique enemies here as well. There are bull bears, which are more dangerous Bulborbs with more health. There's the puffy blowhogs. Okay, these guys suck. I mean, blow, they don't even kill your Pikmin, but they're annoying and always hanging around the bull bears. And to make matters worse, we got the bumbling snitchbug over here who puts your Pikmin up into the ground, and Wollywogs, but tougher Wollywogs. So yeah, okay, you know what? The distant spring is a gauntlet. Well, now that we're quite literally at war, I think we have to talk about the game's biggest enemy. No, it's not that. This is the crushing glitch. Essentially, even when an enemy dies, upon its falling animation, there's a chance that the Pikmin under the falling corpse will clip through the floor and automatically die. This is my least favorite aspect of Pikmin 1, and they didn't even bother fixing this in the Wii release. It's not just the enemies too. I mean, this doesn't happen as often, but your Pikmin can die just being under a bridge as well. I used to try no death runs in Pikmin 2 back when I played it like nobody's business, but the idea of doing a no death run in this game, I never even attempted attempted it, I think it's essentially impossible. This glitch goes against every notion of Pikmin in my opinion. The challenge of this game should be from the regular combat and enemies. It's not fair to work hard to grind Pikmin, only to lose them to factors outside of your control. It's really unfortunate because I do think this is single-handedly the biggest flaw with Pikmin 1. Focusing on the distant spring again though, there's a decent number of puzzles here. It's not all combat. Some of these are just about using the C-stick to move your Pikmin through tight corridors, but some of it is just the same as other areas, like bomb rock walls and building bridges. Out of all the puzzles though, getting the Cronus reactor might be my least favorite in the entire game. To give a bit of background, there are colored candy pop buds that can change a Pikmin's color. Outside of this section, they aren't too prevalent, but here, they are required to shift all your blue Pikmin to yellow to get a treasure down, and then switch them all back, which takes all day. Literally, it takes an entire in-game day. I really admire the ship parts, no matter how annoying they can be to get. I'm looking at you, Shock Absorber. I love how each one has a unique Dr. Seuss type of design with so many moving parts on it. It's a very satisfying progression starting your journey with a hunk of scrap metal and then putting a Pokeball on it. Olimar will write journal entries for each one too. I specifically love his writings for the Libra, which was given to him by his daughter and named after her astrological sign.
Alright, let me tell you about the astrological signs because they mean so much. So, Olimar's daughter is born in October. We know that because she's a Libra, which means she's self-independent, she's rambunctious, she stands up for herself, and she likes mayo with her chicken tenders.
Similar story about the Sagittarius, which was given to Olimar by his son instead. They either reused the model for this or his kids have no creativity. All of this though adds to my appreciation for Olimar. I mean, think back to every Nintendo main character. Kirby doesn't talk, Mario doesn't talk, Link doesn't talk, Samus doesn't talk. But here we see the unique thoughts of Captain Olimar, who writes about his family and his survival. But on top of that, we hear about his day-to-day life. This is an average Joe at the end of the day, talking about his back pain with getting a massage machine, cooking some noodles. He's a surprisingly in-depth Nintendo character, and one of my personal favorites for this reason. In fact, this whole game's presentation is phenomenal. Now, this game wouldn't be up for any game awards. Even the ones that get nominated and deserve them lose if they're made by Nintendo.
But for 2001 standards, if you came up to me and you showed me this back then, I would have said that those are pretty good graphics.
Pikmin and its promotional art would use a more crude CGI art take on Olimar and the Pikmin, which I know was probably because it's an early GameCube game in part, but it gives the game a distinct charm that's admirable to this very day. Everything's a bit plasticky looking, sure. You couldn't replicate this in 2023, but you shouldn't have to either. It's a relic of its time, but held up quite well. I think one thing I really love about Pikmin is the atmosphere. I mean, there are slight hints indicating that this is indeed a place that humans once lived, but it's not in your face. Pikmin 4 looks to be a little more obvious with it, which I think is fine, but Pikmin 1 is interesting as art because you barely get those remnants. You get a little bottle and paper bags, but at the same time, it's very important to tell you that Olimar is extremely small, and the music is debatably one of the best Nintendo soundtracks ever, hands down. Hands down! If you ever want to forget about your life, turn on one of these 30-minute Forest of Hope songs on YouTube. It works for me. The music is a good mix between ambient-like and melodic, and I would kill to hear this with an orchestral team. Bottom line, the presentation might be a little rough around the edges, but I think it comes off as more charming than anything else.